Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Global Lounge, a place where business aviation experts meet in order to speak about some of the most interesting topics within our industry. Today, I'm happy to be joined by the top management of GlobeAir, which is Europe's leading private jet charter company within the very light jet segment. And specifically, I'm here with Bernhard Fragner, who's the CEO of the company. So, thanks for coming. And two of the VPs of GlobeAir, respectively, Ricardo Santana for business operations and Jonathan Berdoz for sales and marketing. I'm happy and thrilled to be your host today. I am also working for GlobeAir, and I work for the digital marketing and communications team. So happy to be here and lead the conversation tonight. Also, I'd like to specify that the reason why we're here today, gathered without any masks but keeping a fair distance between each other, is because during the last month we started to slowly come back to the office, and we're keeping all the highest safety measures in order to limit any contagion. And we are taking care that we are getting tested regularly. So the reasons why we are here tonight in this format is also for this reason. Without any further ado, I'd like the panelists to kickstart the conversation. So Bernhard, I'd like for you to start with the owners. So can you tell us a little bit about why we're here tonight in this format at the GlobeAir Lounge for the first episode, and perhaps something about GlobeAir for the audience and about yourself?
Yeah, thank you for your intro and having us here on the GlobeAir Launch. I think it's very exciting that we're here, and I'm very proud that the entire team organized it in the way as it is currently. And I think it has potential for future discussions and getting more insights of our industry and our company. So I think it's the way forward, and I really appreciate what has been arranged. Yeah, I think 2020 is a very special year, and it's worth to talk about it. I have joined business aviation back in 2002, and GlobeAir has started operations late 2008 when we received our AOC. We ran right into the first crisis, which was the so-called Lehman crisis. But with certainty, I can say that 2020 was by far something we never expected as a crisis, had a magnitude which never has been seen in this aviation industry before. So I think it's worth to talk about a bit. Now we have a picture about 2020. We know more in detail what happened, and I'm quite convinced that the entire audience want to know which challenges we faced, which learnings we made, who were our customers, did anything change, did we see some changes of behaviors, bookings, how did we respond to the market, how we came through this, actually, the whole crisis. So a lot of questions. I think the audience is interested into that, and that's why we're here, and I think we should talk about that. And I'm happy that having Jonathan and Ricardo with me, who were very strong management partners during the entire crisis. So let's start and let's see what hot topics we can share with.
Perfect. And so, because you mentioned, let also Jonathan introduce himself. So Jonathan, you're the VP of Sales and Marketing at GlobeAir since 10 years now. So you gain a lot of experience. What can we expect from your contribution tonight?
Yeah, with pleasure. As Bernhard just mentioned, we had a challenging year 2020 with ups and downs in March and then up at the end of the year. We could really see that the dream team worked really well together. It could basically go back from sleeping mode to a full speed mode. So it was really an exciting year for me as well, and I'm pleased to hand over back to you.
Thank you. Ricardo, last but not least, can you introduce yourself and tell us why does it make sense to review 2020 in terms of operations?
Sure, with pleasure. I think it's important to pass you us the perspective of the operations, how we lived on the day-by-day basis after this crisis hit us. One unique crisis in aviation that basically stopped a lot of aircrafts from flying and a lot of airliners to proceed with their normal operations, and pass you a little bit of the insights how we lived within the crisis room. I'm responsible for the team that is working on the background until the aircraft takes off, but doing and developing a great job and constantly adjusting to the challenges of the day by day.
That's great. So thank you for introducing yourself, all three. I'd like to outline the agenda for tonight. So as we've talked about, 2020 was unprecedented. What we're going to do, we're going to review the year quarter by quarter, thanks to your contribution. And then we're going to move on with an outlook for 2021 and see which kind of trends for private aviation and aviation in general you have identified as the most important. And later on, we're going to move to the Q&A session, because we've received so many questions about the uncertainty of the future for travelers and so on and so forth. And Brexit is one of the hottest topics as well, so we're going to tackle that as well. And so this is the agenda for the evening. But with Bernhard, I'd like to dive into the review, so which is the first point of today's topic of 2020 with Q1. So let's start and think about that time when the pandemic was something we did not know about. Can you tell us about Q1 2020 and what was going on at that time?
We consider ourselves, so GlobeAir, as one of the market leaders in Europe in the light jet segment. We started 2020 by operating 20 aircrafts, which we operate across Europe. We have built over more than a decade a very strong brand, and we are delivering close to 10,000 of flights to the market. So our plans were quite strong for 2020. And a company in our size, it's very important that we have a budget in place. So we finished our budget planning, I would say, in December 2019. And we were quite ambitious because we had a very good outlook. 2019 was developing quite well, customer base grew, so we were quite confident that we can achieve good results for 2020. Economy was recovering, so the entire environment was in our favor. So we had strong plans and many projects on the way, and actually quite positive about the start into the year. Usually at this time of the year, so in early January, we start with our annual safety trainings with the crew. So we are suspending operations for 2 days roughly, and we meet all together because I think it's a very important element for the safety culture as well, and for the resource management, that all team comes together. So it's flying crew and non-flying crew, so all the customer service team down to the accounting people, engineers, we meet all together, and then we have together a very intense training program, and combined with some socializing elements as well, having dinner together or some fun activities, which builds a strong element of the team spirit. So we were all aligned as of mid-January that the business is ahead of us, and then we can continue as planned. And the bookings actually for January developed quite well. So we were basically January, February absolutely on track. We saw businesses coming as predicted. The numbers of what we are purchasing, so our spendings were also in line. So we were pretty much plus minus 5% on budget course, which it's very important that you also already have in the first quarter a good overview how the year will develop, because in the first quarter, if the numbers are not that matching, you still have time to adjust whatever needs to be adjusted, that you can basically bring the remaining year into a safe place. Yeah, that's why it kicked well off. Very classic in the first quarter are the traditional winter destinations for holiday, so skiing trips and so on and so forth. And yeah, everything was in line and developed quite well. Myself as well. Projects developed, all looked good, so we were quite confident for the entire year.
Of course, we couldn't predict what was going to happen next. But just to stay in Q1 and in this beginning of the development of the quarter, Jonathan, would you like to expand a little bit on sales and marketing activities in this period in time?
Certainly. So Q1 started, as Bernhard just mentioned, very positive for us. We had a good outlook for the whole year 2020. On the marketing side, we also attended the Crypto Finance Conference in St. Moritz. We had a lot of activities planned for all year 2020, including Formula One with our partner Alfa Romeo Racing, and multiple such as golf, soccer, and so on. So all the planning was going ahead for 2020. We did a lot of ski trips, also a lot of business trips starting in February. January is basically a weak month for business aviation in terms of business flights. And then March started as well very regular compared to 2019, a slight increase, but everything according to our expectations and budget. We also heard some rumors starting February, early March, about a new form of virus reaching soon Europe. So it was really uncertain for us on how this would develop in the upcoming weeks. And early March, we had our first issues as well that we started to tackle. We had Italian passengers flying to the UK, which were not allowed to enter Great Britain at the time of landing, so we had to fly them back. Because at this stage, at the very early stage of the virus, we could clearly identify that the UK was very strict with it. If you have been in Italy in the past 10 days, then basically you cannot enter Great Britain at all. This was the cue.
So you started feeling the pandemic, and I'd like to ask Ricardo, when was the time when you realized that the crisis was real and that actually we all know what happened next around the 15th of March? There is a general lockdown in Austria, but can you tell us how did you experience it?
So the mid-March marked a time on our lives. I think everyone's life got heavily impacted by what happened on those days, with the different lockdowns that started in Italy and went through until the UK was one of the last ones. Also in our operations there were big changes. Suddenly we started to have restrictions released daily, passengers that could not fly from one destination to another, like Jonathan pointed out right before, and major airliners stopping and cancelling a lot of flights. In that time we focused in two very important points. One, to try to get a hold on the new rules that were launched basically on the daily basis, and the other one to try to bring our customers, and especially our big customers, the one that trust in us since long time, bring them back to the major residences. So we did this within Europe and also worldwide, because some of our customers, they were on vacation abroad on the other side of the Atlantic, and we organized some larger charters to bring them back to Europe. Internally, it was very important for us that instead of just being afraid and concerned about the future, we were prepared. So in that moment, we tried to set up different scenarios. We started with the management team and then going along with the rest of the team, including, very important, the operations and the crew, trying to prepare different scenarios and organize the different realities that we would face through the next months, which we all know what happened after.
Yeah, so you reacted very proactively and you were flexible, and we would like to know from you, Bernhard, what are really the measures that what was the company's strategy to tackle the crisis from the beginning, and why was this so important to react very fast?
Yeah, I remember very well. It was actually the 11th of March, where we got basically the announcement from the governments that we are diving into full lockdown. And at that time, they also published all the, they called it landing bans. So we were not able basically to cross any border. There were no flights possible. And at that time, we knew we need very quick decision. First decision to be made is, are you suspending operation and stopping entirely and let's see what's coming? Or you continue somehow? And I think this decision the entire team made very quickly. We said, okay, we go ahead. We have some responsibility. I mean, behind the company are 500 to 600 people, if you count all the families behind and so on. So we have some responsibility and also taking accountability. That's why we decided very fast that we continue, whatever this meant at that time. But as Ricardo said, we sat down together, defining plans. So for this, we established immediately a crisis team, where basically VPs and some team leads were a member of. We had constant meetings. Sometimes we met twice a day and updated what's going on the market, what's going on from the regulators across Europe, and how we can respond to that. So I think this was very important that we had this crisis team immediately in place to find solutions, how to continue. And our planning horizon, to be very honest, was just day by day. Let's go ahead and then let's learn what's coming and adapt. Yeah, and then we saw immediately, as just Jonathan mentioned, we're losing a very important element of our marketing, which is events, where we are present as a company, as a team, where we meet our customers. Obviously, we also were not allowed to visit any more customers, no events out there. So we lost basically overnight a very important channel that we meet customers and let's say find new customers on a very personal way, which we are used to the last 10 years, I would say so, and was quite successful. So the decision was immediately made also by our marketing team. They said, okay, we have one strong channel, which is online, and if people are forced to sit at home and cannot go out, any online channel, whatever you find, blogs, podcasts, any social media channels, became a very important source of information. That's why we decided, okay, we have to go immediately on to have our social plans ready, find ways to target our audience, bring our information out there. That's why it was so important that basically our marketing and online team doubled their forces and pushed way more than we had ever before done, because we knew that communication, not only to the team inside, but also to the outside world, is a key element now, as in any crisis. So we actually were prepared, because as an airline you have to have an emergency response plan in place, which defines ways of communication in case of an emergency. So we knew the mechanism and what to do. We had no emergency, but we had a crisis, and the mechanism are the same in terms of communication. That's why we had a very strong communications plan, because we needed the same thing for the team. We had people at home. We decided to send people on home office as much as we can. Of course, we had an ops team, very important, being here, and the customer service team. So communication to the team, communication to crew, what's going on, what's next. So I think it was very important to tell everybody what are our plans, even if we only knew that these are the plans for the next 2 days, but these are the plans for the next 2 days. Uncertainty is obviously an element which you don't want to have in this situation. That's why communication was one of our top items on our agenda, which we went through on every meeting of the crisis team. Another important element was biosecurity. It was important, even as a team, that we take care of the health of our entire team. We knew the pandemic is around, the virus is around, so we had to take care of the health. And not just for our team, for crew. Crew is really exposed out there, and so we had to take care how we tackle the risk of infection and to mitigate it as much as possible. That's why biosecurity became a very important item those days.